Hello and very warm welcome to Dr. Zia Ahmed YouTube channel. Dear students, today we shall be talking about another topic of stylistics subject, and the topic is that the language of poetry. Here we shall be trying to assess how language of poetry is different from the normal language, or if we compare it with the language of prose or that of the drama, how much it's going to be different. So in this PPT lecture, we shall be talking about an exploration of poetic expression, style, and theory. Let's enter into it and see how the language of poetry is distinct from the language of other subjects or areas. So first of all, let us introduce to ourselves. First of all, poetry uses a distinct language, emphasizing aesthetic, emotional, and symbolic dimensions. So it means that if on the outset we want to differentiate between the kind of language used in other areas, poetry's language becomes different because of the aestheticism involved into it, beauty, the creation of beauty involved into it, and while creating, how much emotion is expressed and becomes important through the symbols or the representation of the symbols. If something is done like that, it may be called language of poetry. It focuses on some of the important features. For example, one needs to see what are the features of poetic language. It focuses on that, and then some of the examples from famous poets can be discussed with regarding to that, and some supporting literary theories may also be considered. So these features will highlight how much aestheticism is involved, how much emotion is working there, and how much symbolic representation is possible. So that should be called as the introduction of language of poetry. There are some of the important features of this language, which may be called poetic language or language of poetry. The very first feature is the figurative language, metaphor, simile, and symbolism. Definitely, these areas, these things can also be used in any other genre, but they are poetry specific, and therefore more and more of metaphor and simile observations is possible to be seen in the language of poetry. In fact, we should say that it is the figurative use of these things that makes the language of poetry. Everyone knows what is this metaphor kind of thing. It means that we are declaring or assigning the characteristics to one thing, one character as it is, like saying that he is a lion, and then we can also say that he's as brave as a lion in order to differentiate between metaphor and simile. We can also symbolize some of the representations. And the second thing, which is really very important, not only figurative use but also the sound devices which the poets most of the time use. For example, one of the sound device is the rhyme scheme, which every student knows that the ending words or the sounds of any line of poetry rhyme with each other. They are almost similar. In most of the poetry has something like that. In modern poetry it may not be there, but in the classical poetry, rhyme scheme is there. And then it is the alliteration. That means some of the vowel sounds are repeated in sentences. These vowel sounds, when are repeated, is called alliteration. And then there are the kind of consonant sounds, or the repetition of sounds. Alliteration can also be the repetition of words, but assonance can be the repetition of the vowel sounds. Same would be the case with consonants. If we have some sounds like that, sounds of the consonants which are repeated, we may be calling it consonants. Then is the rhythm and the meter. Most of the time the students might have listened pentameter, hexameter, etc. So the lines of poetry can be studied, analyzed with respect to the meter, and that meter can be further divided into syllable. That is the rising and falling syllable. When they combine together, they make the meter. Some of the poetic lines are pentameter. Most of the time it's very famous one. It's called blank verse as well. So meter is the characteristic of language of poetry. Because of this rise and fall, as we say the syllables are like that, we have the rhythm in the poetry as well. Poetry also creates some type of ambiguity and condensation. In few words more and more things are said. When it is done at that time, ambiguity is there, so that the reader may be able to explore, or the reader is invited for exploration. Writers also have the style of creating images, which is called imagery, and this is done most of the time with the help of the sensory nerves, or one can say sensory type of language. That means which appeals to our five senses. If such a thing is done, at that time one can easily claim that it is the sensory language being used. So the characteristic features of the poetic language are figurative use, sound devices, rhythm and meter, ambiguity and condensation, imagery and sensory language. If these things are happening in any piece of literature, and the language being used there can be easily safely termed as the language of poetry. Let's discuss them separately. Figurative language, first of all, as I already talked about, it is the metaphor, which is very important here. The example is coming from Emily Dickinson. Hope is the thing with feathers. I mean, hope is something which doesn't stay at one place. It is flying most of the time, and one needs to, or one is most of the time running behind it. So here, hope has been used as a metaphor to represent the desires and the wishes of the human beings. And what type of hope most of the time can be, that is explained through this one. So such metaphors, when are used, that become the part of the poetic language. And same is the case, hope is personified as the bird, as I have explained. Theoretical portion says about this that Richard's concept of temor and vehicle, this can be used in order to construct any metaphor. And then comes the sound devices, as already repeated. These are the alliterations. Once, for example, look at these lines which say something like this: once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary. These lines show definitely some of the repetitions, like weak and weary. Then is the midnight dreary. All these sounds are being repeated. These words are being repeated. The ending sounds or the beginning sounds, weak and weary, for example, that should be termed as alliteration. And it also creates a rhyme because of the up and down sounds. It also is used to enhance musicality and the mood. For example, this theory comes from Jacobson's poetic function. Jacobson says that focuses on the message itself, the signifier. So in this way, the sounds become very much important. One can say the sound devices become very much important in the construction of poetry through the language. And same is the case with the rhythm and meter, for example. In rhythm and meter, iambic pentameter is the most famous one. It has 5 iambs per line, as Shakespeare has been using, Marlowe has been using, Milton has been using. This is also called the free verse because it may be having not the style of the fixed meters, it may be having different meters as it was used by Walt Whitman. For example, I celebrate myself and sing myself. Myself is repeated twice. Celebrate, sa sound, and then sing is repeated twice. So it is up to the poet what he uses. So whatever he uses, it creates rhythm and meter in the poetry. It goes to reflect the democratic voice of Walt Whitman. In this case, Bakhtin's heteroglossia concept becomes very much important because he says that in literature, especially in fiction, in language, we can use multiple voices and styles. So this multiplicity of voices and styles makes it important for us when we say that the language of poetry carries rhythm and meter. Condensation and ambiguity needs also to be understood. For example, if you look at this line, it says a thing of beauty is joy forever by Keats. This is simple line definitely, but it has got deep philosophical meaning. This is the type of way through which some kind of ambiguity can be created. For example, Paul Valery has indicated that poetry is not the language we speak, but the language we dream of. So through the dreaming of the language, some type of condensation and ambiguity is created, and that carries a lot of philosophical and other meanings in the few packed words. That is the also characteristics of the language of poetry. Symbols and imageries, I have been already talking about this. Let us say what these symbols are. For example, the woods are lovely, dark and deep. This is the line that comes from Robert Frost. This line uses the word woods, and it uses the characteristic of words, lovely, dark and deep. These words, if we say, are the symbol of desire of human being or something unknown or death or retreat. And the same thing can be also talked about the imagery. For example, imagery creates mood, tone and interpretive layers through which we can further understand how the symbol of wood has been used and what type of wood are there. These are lovely, also dark and deep. All these things combined together create an image also, which is called technique of imagery. Fry, for example, talks in his archetypal criticism, saying that recurring symbol across literature, when it takes place, it is called imagery, or it is called some type of symbolism. So this is the way how the language of poetry works in order to create poetry. If we try to consider some of the theoretical portions that we have been talking about, Roman Jacobson says that poetic function prioritizes signifier over signified. This is very easy for the students of linguistics to understand the difference between signifier and signified. Jacobson says that signifier becomes more important as compared to signified. Cleanus Brook, another theorist, says hearsay of phrase, form and meaning are inseparable. According to him, the form of the words, the meaning which they construct, they are inseparable. They cannot be resolved together. So that is why it is necessary to discover those meaning. Jacques Derrida also has the similar kind of opinion. According to him, difference meaning is deferred. It means that the meaning is not ready. It needs to be deferred for some time. And then this difference will be able to teach the people what the real meaning is. All these things can happen inside poetry only. For example, if we take just one line as a case study, that is, April is the cruel month. This line appears in The Wasteland, as everybody knows. April is the cruelest month. Here, mix of voices, historical references, and myth is present. Why the month of April is cruel? There may be some historical facts behind that, maybe some other genetical or natural element associated with that, because of which it becomes the cruelest month. Why it should be cruelest when it is related with the reproduction or with the rebirth of anything? Why it is the cruelest? It says use of fragmentation, irony, and intertextuality. So when we try to analyze the words in this sense, that fragmentary nature is there because nothing has been attached on the sides to show that April would be the cruelest month. And irony is also there because for the month of April, we consider, as Chaucer says, that it is the month of April, everybody is happy, birds are happy, human beings are happy, flowers are happy, wind is happy. And here we have some irony that the poet is saying that April is the cruelest month. So it may be cruel in the sense that it increases the population, it increases the population of everything, it brings more good to the human life, but we are calling it cruelest because for some people it may not be that good one as well. T.S. Eliot says that objective, correlative, external objective to evoke emotion. He says that this type of objective, if it is used, which evokes our emotion at that time, it is definitely the language of poetry. We can conclude by talking in the sense that poetic language is compressed, symbolic, musical, and layered. That are the characteristics of language of poetry. These characteristics may be existing in some other forms of literature as well, but in poetry, compression is more, symbolism is more, musicality is more, and the layered of language is more. And therefore we can also say theories deepen our understanding of how poetry works. That is about the literary criticism, theoretical criticism, that it says to analyze poetry through the theories, and as a result the understanding is increased, and then poetry transforms language into experience. You know, the poets are there to tell their experiences. First of all, they themselves experience, and then they share their experience with their readers. If such a thing has been done in a language, that should be called as the language of poetry. These are some of the references that are used in this PPT, the opinion that has come in this PPT. So that's it, my dear students, from me. Hope you have understood something about the language of poetry. How does it work, what type of language it is, and how it differs from the other things. That is important to know. And therefore it ends here. See you some next time in some next video. If you understand something out of it, do not fail to hit the subscribe button as well as the like button. So see you next time very soon.